question I should have asked you but didn't.
You should have asked Mo what he uses to treat his hair.
That is a good one.
Nobody knows, by the way. Nobody knows. Even I don't know. It's a secret, trade secret.
Welcome to the Open Metaverse podcast. I'm your host, Mehdi Farouk, Senior Tokenomics Analyst at Mocha Brands. On the other side of the mic, we have special guests with us. We have the founders of Aptos, Mo and Avery. Welcome, guys.
Hey, good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Guys, to kick things off, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your crypto origin story? So starting off with Mo first.
Yeah, well, Mehdi, thanks again for having us, and excited to be on the show. Well, my crypto origin story probably is a long one. I'll try to make it as tight as possible. I'm a first generation immigrant. Grew up in Brooklyn, and growing up in New York, my father didn't have many options as a job, and he ended up working as a taxi driver at night. As the second job. And while he was doing that, he would earn income, but that income wouldn't necessarily stay with him. It would actually end up going to a taxi medallion owner, which was interesting. And so I took note of that, understanding that there are many parties involved in these types of transactions and work that takes place. And it's the people that are working don't end up necessarily accruing all that value themselves. Fast forward, I studied economics and psychology and got to work in finance, and I thought, wow, I really made it. Working in the heart of New York City and in kind of an industry that it's known for. But I learned that same lesson that stayed with me again, or a lot of the value that's being created by many parties is going to a bunch of folks in between that actual value creation. And so you start scratching your head as you get smarter, of course, and realize, why is that happening? Why do these inefficiencies exist within these legacy systems? Fast forward, I went to business school and was working at BCG when I got put on a consulting case for a blockchain project and realized blockchains are an incredibly efficient system that allow for the parties that are creating the value to share the value among the right constituents. And I thought things like programmatic execution could potentially be an immense component to solving society's inefficiency problems. I learned about Bitcoin and ended up joining a company called Consensus that was building the Ethereum stack, things like Truffle and Fura and MetaMask, which is a developer tool, funny enough. And while I was there, I realized, wow, you can actually bring things like digital securities and payments to life in a very cool way. And again, the value that's being created can sit with the parties that actually are creating that value or need to exchange that value. I think we also saw firsthand the challenges of building products on top of these tech stacks that were quite new and in their infancy. Eventually, learning about protocols like Ethereum, I realized there's a lot more that developers need in this space to bring their innovations, their imagination to life. I ended up joining Avery at Facebook and realized there's a technology that could actually potentially solve this stuff at scale. And Avery, I'll give it to Avery to talk about it in detail. But it's been amazing to see the evolution of this space at the infrastructure level that really now solves these problems that legacy systems have created an immense amount of abstraction away from the endpoints. And so I'm excited to be on this journey and looking forward to kind of digging in a little bit more. Avery, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mo. First off, Mo and I are very different people, but I think that's why we complement each other so well. My background is very on the other side of the country. I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. lived there for the better part of my life, and then went off to college at Northwestern, where I studied computer science and electrical engineering. I did a PhD in high performance computing and spent a lot of time in different national labs such as Los Alamos, Sandia, and Argonne. We got to do cool work around supercomputing infrastructure. I worked on something called MPI, or message passing interface, which allows you to support applications such as protein folding, scientific simulation, and finite element analysis on the largest supercomputers in the world. After that, I went to Yahoo for 4 years to work on web search and developed something called Apache Giraffe, which is a large-scale graph processing infrastructure that could do PageRank, triangle counting, and matrix factorization. In 2011, I came to Meta, Facebook called it at the time, to work on data infrastructure. And then in 2018, joined the Libra project, as it's formerly known, which became then DM. And eventually became the tech lead of the team that was working on the blockchain at that time. And so it's been a really interesting journey for me. My journey is mostly through technology and infrastructure, and thinking about like how do we take the concepts from supercomputing, with distributed systems that I've worked on in the past, and then kind of apply them towards a space of blockchain to support essentially the largest applications in the world. And this is something that I think Mo and I are equally passionate about, and we're excited to be here.
Wow, you guys both have strong founder market fit for L1. Like I'm impressed. And Mo, I kind of also resonate with the platform risk. I'm from an emerging market. I've been deplatformed many times. So I get the motivation for joining Web3. So to kick things off a bit more, I wanted to discuss the scalability of Aptos. So at the moment, we have about 150 L1s and L2s. And cumulatively, they won't be able to support, in terms of throughput, a Web2 killer app, let's say Fortnite or a TikTok. And we have seen multiple innovation like zk EVM, parallel transaction execution with Solana, sharding with Near. How is Aptos going to solve this, and what will be Aptos' secret sauce that tackles this?
Yeah, I think I'd take the first crack at this one. So basically, we started designing the blockchain back in 2018. And the language, it was designed to support billions of people. That was the mission that Facebook had, and that's the one we thought about. Was important to solve. And when we moved out of Facebook and started Aptos, we thought that mission was even broader, to reach the whole world, not just the Meta users. And so with that comes scale, latency challenges, as well as safety. And for each of those, we've kind of addressed them in different ways. So first of all, with the developer experience, developers today in Web3 have a really hard time of getting their ideas from the ideation all the way into production. And so Move helps immensely with that. It's a specialized language specifically for smart contract programming. It's deterministic, it's hermetic. It is also a very simple language, so that you have fewer things and fewer ways you can make mistakes and errors. Also, there's something called the Move Prover, which allows you to formally verify certain aspects of your program in a specification language, which allows you to hopefully augment whatever auditing you provide on the side with kind of programmatic auditing. And that, in accordance with unit tests and this specific language, it's just safer. It's just faster for developers to get their applications into production. That's one thing. The other thing is, from a blockchain standpoint, you kind of hinted at earlier, which is great. All the blockchain throughput together in the world can't support a single application in the internet space, like Amazon or Facebook or Instagram. And the reason why is it just doesn't scale. All those blockchains combined can do what a single MySQL server can do, and it takes hundreds of thousands of those servers to support those applications, just one of them. And so our goal is to really be able to take our software stack and support as many resources as we can bring to it. So as validators start to increase the amount of CPUs and memory and storage available to them, whether on the same machine or multiple machines, that's something that the network can actually adjust to, and the software stack can take advantage of. And that's where the idea of pipelining and batching and parallelizing each of the stages through the design we have is something that brings that massive efficiency to scale. And today you can kind of see it. We've already support tens of thousands of transactions in a mainnet-like environment, and we also support sub-second latency in most of the common cases, and that's makes us the fastest network available today. So while it's still early on days, we do believe there's a long way to go. I think that the promise, like there's already great infrastructure we have available in things like Aptos that support the largest applications in the world today.
Excellent. So, Avery, you did mention Move language that has helped tremendously in terms of scalability. But one question that kind of comes to mind is that the idea over here is Web2 have the most numbers of developers, like millions of developers, and Web3 currently has maybe 10, 20,000 developers altogether. But EVM at the moment has all the network effects, all the developer tooling, and first mover advantages. So what will be the unique selling point or Move apart from the scalability, for dev to basically come and use this rather than EVM, since EVM majority of the blockchains out there use that.
Right. I do agree with you that EVM has a lot of tooling and amazing mindshare around it in the current Web3 space, and that's fantastic. It shows that there's a need, right, for these kind of things out there. That being said, EVM is going to be something that's going to be harder to move forward. So as you think about how you evolve the language and the virtual machine and the ability for us to kind of build smart contracts safely and securely and quickly, that's something that it's going to be just harder for that kind of that group of communities to move quicker on. And so what we've done with Move is like we're shipping new things available every month. Like recently we deployed something called resource groups, which allow objects to be grouped together in the way you store them physically for optimization of gas costs and efficiency. We just added something called the Move objects to the core Move language to be able to allow composability and dynamic behavior between NFTs in a very native and easy, intuitive way. And as we continue to build out the prover and new compilers and virtual machines to support Move even further in the future, that's something that we can kind of move quickly on. And we think that what we've seen so far from developers is they've really responded to this. Every hackathon we had one in May in our office in 2022. We had one in Seoul very recently, earlier this year. Developers are able to build some amazing applications in short periods of time. And so that kind of shows us that we are making great progress in terms of the tooling, in terms of the documentation and the support in the community that's coming up with Move. And we're really excited about that going forward.
Yeah, just to maybe kind of add to that, I think Avery said this really well, right? Like our singular focus was to build the best developer experience possible. And, as we think about Move, as we think about the design decisions that the team has made, and as we think about the next generation of entrepreneurs and builders that are entering the space, they understand that Web3 is a core component to their product, but may not necessarily be the only component that they want to focus on. So, whereas before when, in 2016 and 2017, when I was in the Ethereum community, our only focus was for maximum decentralization. And with that came a compromise to, well, the developer experience means you have to piece things together. And by piecing things together, like, yes, you are able to achieve that goal, but the maintenance of that product, the user experience becomes very clunky. And so, I think, again, our team is very keen on making sure that developers have just a phenomenal experience. Move is a centerpiece for that. And, with the feedback to Avery's point, with the things that we hear at our hackathons and our even our accelerator cohorts is it's like chewing cotton candy in Aptos. So, we like that, and we want to continue to, of course, improve on that too. So
Yeah, that's very good to hear. So I also want to do a thought experiment. So hypothetically, let's say we're into 2025. Aptos is an amazing blockchain. Everybody wants to use it. It's highly performant, low latency, but there's also strong network effect associated with Solidity. So can Aptos theoretically support EVM or Solidity? Like for example, on Solana, you have Neon Labs that can support natively Solidity, at least in the future. Do you guys have internal discussion regarding this, or like what's the thought process there?
That's a great question. I think we can support EVM and Solidity. We have done some back-end experiments, and actually some community members have built some pretty amazing tools to support EVM in different ways, either through translation into Move or directly kind of implementing down to the core stack as prototypes. And those are pretty interesting and compelling. But I think the downside is that we kind of comes with all the EVM behavior that's as part of it. And so you're not going to necessarily see the best performance with EVM. You could get a compatibility layer, which is great. And that might be very helpful in terms of being able to leverage all the network effects that you're talking about. But I do think that Move provides an experience which is going to be much more tuned towards what we're trying to build within Aptos, and again, supporting our mission of scalability, latency, parallelism, all those things.
So scalability and decentralization, there's a trade-off, right? So in terms of being sufficiently decentralized where we don't have to forego scalability, what do you think is the right metrics to kind of measure that? Like what is the right Nakamoto coefficient that you guys are targeting? How many validator set will it take for to have that kind of sufficient decentralization whilst not foregoing the scalability that you guys are thinking about?
That's a great question. So I think for us, we believe that we're going to be offering a high throughput, low latency, decentralized database, as a product going forward. And for that, inherently you can't have a large, like you can't have like 1 million validators out there doing that. I think that's going to be very difficult to do. And it also is, to that point, a very expensive cost on the network. The more validators you add, at some point, there's diminishing returns with respect to security. You have the increased cost because those validator costs need to be paid by the network over time. And so our plan really is, to work on more meaningful numbers. As you kind of hinted at, we are less concerned about things like number of nodes and more concerned about what is the resiliency of the system towards different kinds of failures and faults. And the Nakamoto coefficient and what we call also the liveness coefficient, kind of the corresponding metric, I think are very important ones. So Nakamoto coefficient, for those kind of not aware of, is the number of machines in different kind of failure dimensions in which your system fails to make progress or fails from a safety perspective. And then from what we call the liveness coefficient, that's kind of the minimum amount of machines in terms of being able to make forward progress in the network. And those numbers are meaningful to us. So, for example, many networks today have thousands of nodes out there that claim massive decentralization, but in reality, most of those nodes are doing nothing. They actually contribute nothing to the security of the network. If you remove 90% of them, the kind of dust of the stake, it doesn't affect the security of the network at all, and they kind of mostly incur a cost on the network in terms of upgradability, coordination, and also the just the ability for the project to kind of move quicker. So we do believe, we want to continue to see the Nakamoto coefficient and liveness coefficient grow. It doesn't necessarily mean that the number of nodes, again, is totally proportionate to that, if that makes sense. As an example, some of the biggest networks in the world, thousands of nodes, might have Nakamoto coefficient, like the biggest one's probably like 30, 31 maybe, or something like that. And so you don't need 2,000 nodes to have a Nakamoto coefficient of 31. You can actually get that at just 100 nodes, basically, if they're kind of equally distributed. So we do focus more on the kind of, again, the more practical resiliency factors of these two metrics, as opposed to broadly just number of nodes in the network. And we think about it in terms of dimensions of number of nodes. Number of node operators is also very important. Like having one node operator operating thousands of nodes is not making the network very resilient. The geopolitical risks, which countries you're in, what cities you're in, as well as other factors, such as if you're using cloud providers, are those cloud providers becoming a centralized point of failure? So that's the kind of way we think about Nakamoto coefficient and liveness coefficient in terms of those specific dimensions and how we want to optimize those towards more resiliency in the network.
Sorry, I'll probe you just a little bit more. In terms of your current Nakamoto coefficient, like what is the Nakamoto coefficient, and for you guys, what's the North Star? Like what's the coefficient that you're kind of aiming for?
Yeah. So just to remind everyone, this is a permissionless network, so it's not something that I can control or anyone can control. It's I think today we're about 102 nodes, give or take, and I think the Nakamoto coefficient is somewhere I think 13, depending on whether we consider nodes or validator operators. So we actually have a report coming out fairly soon that will kind of detail the Nakamoto coefficient in each of these different dimensions, because they all matter. But I think for a fairly new network, that's pretty good. We do want to see it improve over time, but at launch, I think it was definitely one of the most decentralized launches of all time from that dimension.
And in terms of scalability, I know TPS is a bit of a vanity metric. Like it depends on what type of transaction. But again, for a North Star for you guys, what will be, let's say by 2025, what is the TPS you guys will be aiming for on average? Like not a TPS in terms of, let's say, you're doing a peer-to-peer transaction, or let's say validators are communicating with each other. Let's say on average transaction, what will be the TPS you guys would be aiming for in live environment?
This is a great question. I do want to, before I answer that, I do want to kind of have a discussion about what TPS means, right? And so when I come from, like more the analytics database world, there are amazing benchmarks like TPC that kind of help you to understand the difference in workloads amongst different kind of systems, and they can compare apples to apples. In our world, in blockchain, this is a completely undefined metric. And some people mean like instructions, some people mean transactions, some people mean like portions of transactions. And so this becomes a very hard metric to compare between networks. So I do want to caveat with that. When we think about transactions, we kind of think about, there are big transactions, there are small transactions, but maybe one of the things that is easy to agree on is that these are kind of individual atomic operations that are signed by a particular authorizer, and not, so for instance, if I sign, if I have 100 operations and then I sign them all at once, to us, this is like one transaction. It's not going to be 100 transactions. And so from that perspective, I think, we have probably the best throughput of any network out there today. And in the future, we expect, as we can kind of grow our validator network in terms of the scaling their resources, in 2025, we should be easily hitting a million or more transactions per second. If we can't do that, then what are we doing here? We need to be able to build the best infrastructure can support all those internet applications on top of blockchain. And of course, not everything's going on blockchain, right? There's off-chain data that doesn't make sense. But in order to bring as much decentralization into applications, you're going to have the infrastructure that scales out to support it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I had this debate with Hasib, like I hosted him, like from Dragonfly. It was like Google at the moment does 10 to 20,000 TPS, and I was like, what if we could do a million? He was like, that's not possible. So it's good to hear that you guys are aiming for that, and then truly means that you're kind of trying to aim for the world computer, landscape.
I just want to say, I want to say it's very doable. It's not something that's impossible. It just means you have to think about the trade-offs in scalability and scaling that you do support. And it also means probably complicating the lives of validators a little bit. But it is definitely something that we believe is absolutely attainable in our time frame.
Assuming we have the high throughput and low latency, what are some of the use cases that will be very unique that we can see pop up in Web3? Let's say we have this throughput, we have this latency. What will be some of the interesting applications perhaps we haven't seen in Web2, but we'll perhaps see in Web3?
Yeah, I can kind of take this one. I mean, when you think about being able to put this level of throughput to good use, you have to look at what's taking place from a digital transaction perspective today. And if you start to break all the digital transactions down, there's some very high value ones that we see in things like payments and capital markets. We also have seen some very high value transactions in digital art potentially moving. And so as we dissect these various categories inside of Aptos and even within the Aptos community, there's four that really make sense for us. The first is social media, and we can go into some detail there. We see gaming as an industry and a industry vertical that we're very excited about. The third is media and entertainment, and then the fourth is finance. And finance you can kind of break down into traditional payments or just payments in general, and things like capital markets, which we think DeFi kind of falls into that category. And so maybe just spending a little bit of time on that last point. Think about all the money that moves across the world on a daily basis. And there's one component of it that's consumer to merchant, and we think that's one that is very familiar to us. There's merchant to bank or merchant to merchant, and then there's everything that's taking place on a global scale, where it's not just within the borders of a country, but money is moving from country A to country B, and that might be taking place not only from if Mehdi is in the Bay Area and Mo is sitting in somewhere in India, or how do you send money to him within a frictionless environment? But then there's also large institutions and sovereigns that are sending money across to each other with interbank transactions or cross bank transactions. These are billions of dollars of value that are moving on a daily basis, if not trillions, depending on what's going on in the environment. And in order to enable that, there's been so many different networks that have been created that all have to work together and, of course, present a slew of challenges. And so, what Avery's talking about, having a stack that's incredibly efficient, you have to think about the primitives that need to come to place. And there's some exciting announcements coming soon that happy to share with you in the coming weeks. But standard setting on things like identity really need to work well. Of course, you need high throughput and low latency to make that come to life. But all these parties need to be able to agree to some sort of baseline standards to facilitate that frictionless movement of money and value. You can apply all of this not only to payments but capital markets, right? If you need equity products and debt products to move, you need to be able to construct portfolios in real time. You need deep liquidity pools. These standards not only need to exist, but they also need to be accepted and a protocol that everyone has to be using concurrently. And so we're seeing some of that analogy play out in DeFi. We've seen that over the last few years, and the builders there have been incredibly imaginative in terms of reconstructing a new type of capital markets. The challenges, of course, are, you still have to bridge things through different protocols. Standards are not necessarily aligned, whether it's smart contract standards or even business standards or legal standards. And so, we're excited to be solving some of these problems with some of the best partners in the world, whether they're some of the largest DeFi protocols to some of the largest financial players and institutions in the world that see the value in this. And so, this is a use case, an entire vertical, that if you can get this right, you could be focused on this for the next 20 years, most likely. Of course, we're ambitious and think about things like gaming and media and entertainment and others as well. But maybe I'll just pause there if you have any follow-ups. Otherwise, I can chat
No,
about the other
there's a lot
verticals.
to yeah. There's a lot to unpack, and we'll go to other verticals in a moment. So the
Sure.
three things. So apart from scalability, in the last cycle, what we encountered was on-chain reputation and identity. And you can't do under collateralized lending on borrowing because you don't have that, right? We also had user friction in terms of wallets and remembering the seed phase and interacting with it. And the third biggest issue we had was on public blockchain. Institutions cannot build, right? Because you need to have kind of know what your gas fees would be. You need to have KYC customer. You can't have airdrop mechanism because if a sanctioned entity does some kind of airdrop, all of these obstacles will prevent them. So in terms of Aptos, you did mention on-chain identity. How are you guys tackling those two, three issues? Maybe there are some other projects that you guys are closely working with within your ecosystem, or are there certain solutions you are building on that tackles this?
We've learned a thing or two about bringing too many parties to the table to align on standards. And so, one thing that we're doing now is finding the right group of partners across these industry verticals to just get the ball rolling on saying, hey, party A, B, and C, come together and say these are the minimum viable attributes that we want to agree to on standard setting. And so, it's very much a coordination problem. It's kind of a business problem. It's a human-centric problem. And so, when we find financial institutions, payment networks, technology providers, and, maybe even a merchant or two and a consumer that say, hey, these are the things that we're willing to share with each other because these are the most important things that we all have to agree on. Well, then cool, we can roll up our sleeves and get to work. And so this is the stuff that we're starting off today. Of course, Avery can kind of dive into like what needs to exist on chain versus what may not necessarily need to exist on chain. There's a cost, as you correctly pointed out, to the on chain component, but there is a massive appetite to pay for that cost because that gives you the trust, the assurances that if Mo and Mehdi are playing a game with each other or we're doing a DeFi transaction together, we feel that there's some trust there. I'm not going to go into a pool where, I may be subjected to, bad actors. And so, if there's a propensity to pay, then we should find the right parties and actually build that standard on chain. And so we're working on that today, whether it's with, a group of DeFi protocol participants, maybe stablecoin issuers, and then other, payment networks that are out there in the world. And so we're excited to bring those things to market soon. But all of that doesn't exist without this incredible technology. And this is where I can kind of pass it off to Avery. The team is, we have an amazing engineering team that's thinking about privacy, that's thinking about, permissionless environments. And Avery, you should jump in here because there's some exciting stuff to share.
I think a lot of this on the identity side, as Mo correctly pointed out, is really on the business use cases and how you can partner with existing identity providers to do the same kind of work on chain in a much more auditable and verifiable way. And on the blockchain side, what needs to be done is there need to be standards like soulbound token type standards around identity. There also needs to be support for zero knowledge proofs. And so Aptos already kind of supports a lot of different types of zero knowledge proof verification, from bulletproofs to snarks on chain. And so that as a kind of core move primitives. And so that composability is already there. And we were looking for people to play around and start to prototype with that. One thing that we've done a little bit differently is that rather than supporting those primitives with certain curves, is we actually allow people to kind of custom build their proofs with different types of schemes versus curves that they want to match, and also that allows more flexibility with respect to the kind of verification that needs to be done on chain for zero knowledge. So that's just a couple examples. We're also supporting different kinds of other ways in which identity can be fostered through infrastructure around the indexer, around kind of full node submission of these things. And so it's kind of a holistic a technological approach from business use case into the kind of the product infrastructure down all the way down to blockchain, in which we think there can be a meaningful difference here.
You mentioned ZK, like knowledge primitives. Can you give an example of how it would be useful on an application level?
Sure. So I think Yeah, absolutely. So right now, if you want to support like a zero knowledge like rollup on top of Aptos, it's actually pretty straightforward. You could do that. You just need to go ahead and kind of publish your proofs on chain, and then those can be verified through move contracts because there's native functions and they can support different types of curves, different kinds of zero knowledge verification, and kind of mix and match as you're choosing. And that can also support verifying identity or any other things you want to verify through zero knowledge. So that's kind of already available in Aptos, and there's a couple of example use cases out for that. Things like veiled tokens, which is a way that two users can transact where sender and receiver are known, but balances are kind of veiled. So we're excited to see all the different kinds of uses of zero knowledge in the Aptos blockchain in a scalable manner.
You did mention Rollup. So will this be a part of BD strategy to get rollups on Aptos? Because there's a thing with rollups, right? It affects the composability, or it will be something that you will allow to happen permissionlessly if somebody deems it appropriate for the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think I mentioned rollups mainly just as an example of things you could do.
All right.
I think some people might want to build rollups. Some people in the community actually are probably building rollups already, as far as I've heard. But it's something that we also, why rollups exist today in Ethereum is mainly to help scale Ethereum, right? Rollups can do other things. They can provide privacy. They can kind of provide this also like a synchronous environment where the proof generation is like super expensive, but the verification is super cheap. And so that has interesting, application effects as well. It's longer latencies generally. So it really depends on the problem you're trying to solve, and makes sense in certain cases for rollups. But for Aptos, since we provide kind of a very scalable low latency network, scalability is probably not the thing you're going to get mostly from rollups here.
Yeah, and I think Avery said this well, and just to kind of add to it, right? Like it is a business problem, right? And it comes down to what those business problems are and the propensity for these partners to pay for this stuff. So, when it comes to looking at things, other protocols that existed, they needed these scaling solutions. In fact, those scaling solutions needed scaling solutions, right? And so now you're kind of like building on this like very interesting stack that starts to feel wobbly and very difficult to maintain. And so this is where we were just speaking with one of the largest stock exchanges in the world, and their view is like, yeah, we appreciate things like rollups, but they are not the solution that's long term sustainable. In fact, they are looking at new L1s that have come to market like Aptos that can solve this in a much more manageable process, in a more manageable way, but then also continue to scale as those business problems scale and continue to evolve too, right? Like imagine having to roll up. Regulation is evolving, right? It's a spectrum, and so if you have new, let's just look at Europe and what's happening with things like MiCA there. As that evolves, you need to be able to incorporate that into the protocol today. And so, as the world continues to evolve around us, we think like, our very strong opinion is, having these multiple stacks and things like rollups to manage are not necessarily something that a partner wants to have to deal with. It just adds another layer of complexity.
Yeah, I to a certain degree agree. I think it's a good point. Rollups also do not increase scalability. They reduce the gas transaction, but on the base layer they might not reduce. They reduce gas fee, but don't increase the scalability. So you did mention social media, gaming, media, and finance. Those four verticals that you guys are targeting from an ecosystem strategy point of view. We have seen in each ecosystem that if you have unique application, then that ecosystem accrues a lot of value. So we recently saw this with Arbitrum, where you had GMX, a perpetual based exchange. You had Magic, Treasure DAO, which is trying to make a Web3 gaming studio. In Solana, we are kind of seeing this proof of useful work thesis play out. So, in terms of those verticals, what are some of the interesting and unique dApps that you're seeing on Aptos, which are different, which are not your run-of-the-mill copy-paste AMM type things? So, some of the interesting things you're seeing in your ecosystem, or you are kind of um, interested to see their progress going ahead.
Yeah, I think our focus has always been on the user experience, right? And that user varies depending on whether you're talking to a Web3 entrepreneur, a developer, an engineer that sits at a large enterprise, or it's the end user consumer. And so, while we really appreciate some of those projects that you named, innovating across in their respective ecosystems, we've taken that principle of user centric experience very close to heart. Let's talk about just media and entertainment specifically. Right now, the experience for a moviegoer or someone who's streaming, content at home, ends within their respective platforms. However, it doesn't mean that you don't have those platforms disjointed and connected independently on your own, right? Like if I'm going for the movies and now need to go stream content at home, I have to do that independently, right? So NBCU understands this. They also understand that the relationship with the end user has been lost to many of these new platforms that have come to market, right? Whether it's going through an advertisement platform or a social media platform, or even the way they get their content out to market has to go through maybe a hardware device or a software component that just abstracts away that relationship for them. So they wanted to solve for these problems. And so these are real business problems, real end user problems. And we wanted to make that, provide a solution. NBC had this movie coming out with Nick Cage called Renfield. It's a hilarious movie. We're going to be watching it soon as a team. But basically, they wanted an individual to be able to come play a game where you can squash some bugs and win a relic. It's a vampire based movie. So it's kind of like a casket and there's like varying degrees of rarity. But once, Mehdi and Mo play that game, we win a relic. And, even to play that game, you don't have to enter, you don't have to go through a hurdle point of an existing Web3 wallet. In fact, you just enter your username or can even log in with Google or Apple. On the back end, of course, if you win an NFT or a digital asset, there is a record of that digital asset belonging to you. Now you walk into the movie theater and you can say, hey, I played this game. I won this relic. And maybe Fandango or NBC wants to offer free popcorn to you. Maybe Mo and Mehdi want to go to the movies together, and NBC knows that you guys both played the game together, and you want to give one of them a free ticket because they have a rare item. You can do that. And so that level of engagement can go from game to theater. And of course, we can extend our imagination because, after that movie, there's probably a sequel coming. Maybe there's a IRL experience that takes place. In fact, we had an IRL experience at NFT NYC where if you played that game, you could have, got a free ticket to come to our event. And so, it really comes down to, what a content creator wants to imagine, and we can help bring that to life. And so we think that's extremely powerful as we think about, what digital artifacts and assets can really do. So that's kind of on the media and entertainment side. Gaming is a very fascinating one, right? Like, often how many hours do we pour into games where we're spending so much time with each other, with people that we know, people that we don't know that are completely anonymous. But we built these relationships up with a metaverse that's existed, with people in that metaverse, but those relationships are just left there. But what if you can have assets that extend beyond just that metaverse, or even share those digital assets? Take Fortnite, for example, right? They launched a Ralph Lauren or Polo collection of digital assets within their game. So you can buy a digital Polo T-shirt. You can wear it within the game, but that's kind of it. What if I wanted to share that shirt with Avery because he's in that game? I can't do that. What if Avery wanted to, he got that shirt and wants to go into the Polo store and maybe even buy that shirt at a discount because he has the digital version of it? You can't extend these experiences across platforms. So these are the things that we think about not only from a user perspective, but also from a merchant perspective. And so we're really pushing the boundaries of what is a gaming experience versus an IRL experience. And these digital assets start to really paint some really cool experiences that we can activate. And so we're excited about that. We have, I think, over 20 games that'll be going live later this year. That are really, doing some cool things like proof of play, incorporating digital assets. And so, gaming is evolving in front of our eyes. And so we're excited about that too.
So Mo, after this podcast, if I were to go and play around with some of the dApps currently out there on Aptos, what are some of those dApps that you'll recommend across the vertical?
Avery, you want to take this one first?
Well, there's a lot of great places to go. I mean, there's obviously the Topaz Marketplace, which has thousands and thousands of NFT creators and collectors out there. There's some really, if depending if you're inside the U.S. or outside the U.S., there's some interesting DeFi applications you can play around with out there as well. Uh, Maybe dropping some alpha today. If this is going live, probably not, but the same day. But staking is going to be pretty cool. You can do that actually stake directly from a wallet on the Explore page, and that's something anyone can do as of today, kind of. So that's kind of exciting. Keep that quiet until maybe a little bit later. But that's some of the things you can do today that are awesome. And as Mo mentioned, like some of these games are going to be coming out very soon. They're going to be a lot of fun. These games have been designed for millions of users in the past, and the gameplay demos and also the community tests have been really exciting to see with Grand Saga Unlimited as well as Pixelcraft coming out. We did there was an amazing demo by the team back in GDC in March, and the early look is pretty impressive for sure.
Yeah, I think Avery's always dropping some alpha, so pay attention to him and make sure you're following him on Twitter too. My favorite dApp is actually in the works, and so there's an amazing group of folks that were building a social product called Chingari. I think they have 170 million downloads, 45 million monthly active users. And they've been thinking really hard about how you reward creators, how you create this flywheel effect with users that want to have closer touch points with creators. And they've been thinking about these problems for a long time, and figured out how to incorporate a token model to basically make that come to life. They were exploring what building on protocols looked like, and we had a chance to connect with their engineering team and their business team on how to actually bring that life bring that vision to fruition and do it at scale. And so when they saw, what we were building at Aptos from a technology perspective, we kind of really got along very well, almost fell in love, I would say. And now they're building on top of Aptos, and so they're going to be changing the creator paradigm in a way that we only could have dreamed of, right? So, and you've seen these models, right? Twitch has a nice little tipping feature. And a lot of folks have been paying attention to that. But very large social media companies, they can't move as fast as someone like Chingari. They can't reward creators as fast as Chingari can. And so, Web3 ends up becoming this killer feature in your application that, it's not really a dApp. It's just a regular application. Like I want to challenge us a little bit, because I don't think people necessarily care so much about the decentralization component, because decentralization is such a spectrum. But imagine being able to tip your favorite creator in a way that they got paid in an advantageous way compared to the large social media products out there today. And so Chingari is really pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and creators love it. And of course, as a user, you're really excited because I get to support my creator versus like supporting all these other people that I don't necessarily follow. And so it's going to set off an amazing amount of creativity and content creation in a way that we're very excited about. So keep an eye out for. You could download Chingari and use it today, but we're excited about them fully integrating Aptos into their flow in a way that you won't even feel it. You won't even know that you're using a dApp.
I'll definitely check out Chingari after this podcast. Um, so one observation with L1 has been the success of L1 depends on the network effect produced by the dApps, and based on that premise, business development or ecosystem strategy becomes very important. So philosophically, what is the BD or ecosystem strategy for Aptos? And of course, there are multiple options out there, right? Like for example, there are a few ecosystems that are now specifically targeting Web2. There are a few ecosystem that basically does the BD through hackathons. So what is the approach Aptos is taking with this regard?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, to get the flywheel going and bootstrapping a network is really hard. And I think often we talk about things like product market fit. And for protocols, right? It's really protocol market fit, and the market for a protocol is massive. And so, I mean, maybe you're asking me a very hard question. It's like saying, how do you get the internet started up again? Uh, the answer is a lot of hard work. And so you kind of have to look at this from, top down and bottoms up, right? You have very large distribution platforms that exist today that have kind of stayed in the background because they're not sure about these existing technologies that have been out in market. They've tested them. There's some very smart people out there that realize that this infrastructure is fragile. If I turn on minting assets in a very large social media platform, this protocol is going to fall apart very quickly. And so, we paid attention to this very early on. In fact, from our former, Facebook day, Meta days. And so, keeping that in mind, now you can bring, maybe we'll stop calling them the Web2 players, but we can bring some of the largest distributors in the world to this new version of the open and ownership internet, right, which is Web3. At the same time, you have an amazing slew of projects that are being built that have been built over the last 5 years, whether they're DeFi protocols, NFT projects, these communities that exist within different ecosystems. And we love all of them. I mean, I'm a recovering ETH maxi myself. And, I love some of the, the creativity that's existed within these communities. Our view isn't, hey, come build on Aptos and abandon your existing community. I think that's absolutely the wrong thing. We think, Avery, I'm going to quote Avery here, 1 + 1 = 3, right? So we want these communities to come join our communities and build. We want to build together with them. And so, if we can, figure out how to get someone like the D gods and the Bored Ape community to incorporate Aptos, we think that's a win. You don't have to leave your existing community. We want you to augment them and enhance them. And you'll find that there's an amazing group of creators in Aptos that want to get that flywheel going. And so that's hard work, right? You have to be boots on the ground. You have to understand your artist community. I don't grow my hair long just for the looks, right? Like I kind of live and breathe this stuff. And so, I'm excited about some of these NFT artists now incorporating and building on top of Aptos and doing things that they couldn't do in other protocols. But that doesn't mean they have to leave their other protocols. At the same time, Avery talked about the hackathons that we have, and man, we spend a lot of time to make sure that we are supporting the growth all across the world. Aptos means the people, and the people are not just here in Silicon Valley. They're not just in New York. They're in Hong Kong. They're in Singapore. They're in Dubai. They're in Vietnam. They're in Amsterdam. They're in Seoul. And so, as we extend our reach, beyond our own borders. It's been incredibly valuable for us to have. Our first hackathon took place in Palo Alto. Our second one was in Seoul in Korea. We had over 50 projects that ended up submitting projects, which was unbelievable. We couldn't keep up. We actually had to extend the hackathon to make sure we get all the projects to be able to present. Our next hackathon is coming up in Amsterdam. So if you guys want to show up, we'd obviously welcome you and the family to continue to support our ecosystem growth. But there's so many developers that are building, and we want those hackathon folks to continue to scale their projects, whether they've been building on a protocol before or they have completely new ideas and are leaving the Web2 world for a new ownership internet, which is what Web3 is. So this is just incredibly difficult, non-scalable Web3 boots on the ground work that Avery and I actually love doing. Right, we fly out to these cities, we spend time with these engineers shoulder to shoulder. Avery loves solving these problems. I love thinking about business ideas and go-to-market strategies, and so it's incredibly exciting, but it's hard work. There's no easy solution to it.
Love it. So apart from hackathons, I was doing some research. You guys also have an accelerator, if I'm not mistaken. Yes.
Yeah, we do have an accelerator program, and so just to add a little bit more color on that one, we opened up our Bay Area office to anyone, right? Literally anyone. If you have an amazing idea, you can submit it. We have beautiful desk space. I wish I could actually maybe give a tour somehow on a podcast, but you can come build your project with your team right here in the Bay Area. In fact, we are now accelerating the hackathon members from our Seoul hackathon in Korea as well. So, we have organically built this amazing distributed global community through our accelerator program as well. So, please do apply to the accelerator cohort if you have amazing ideas. We love everyone. You could have been building on another protocol. You could be new to the space. You may be a very large company and are looking to leave that large company and have ideas that you want to bring to life. We give financial support, go-to-market support, and of course, physical space to allow you to grow your idea very, very quickly. So we have the accelerator program. We also have a grants program. I encourage everyone to apply and take advantage of the grants from the foundation that does an amazing job of growing the community very organically. And we also just announced, I think, one of the largest artist grant programs out there in the world. And so, we're talking with some of the coolest creators out there, some very large distributors to, bottoms up solo artists, right? If you're the next aspiring Bansky in a digital world or from the physical world that wants to build digital art, take advantage of our artist grant program and apply to that as well.
Awesome. Love the open source office idea. To the last segment of the podcast, I'm cognizant of your time, so this will perhaps take a few minutes. So it will be a rapid fire round. So I'll ask the first question, which is better tech or stronger network effect?
I will say, I mean, look at Google today, right? Like they still show how fast the search is done on the bottom. And so, I agree with Avery. Better tech ends up being an awesome solution, but you still need the network effects to very quickly follow and keep that flywheel going. I cheated. I said both.
More, you might have answered this question. So if you weren't building Aptos, which other ecosystem looks attractive? It could be either ethos-wise, tech-wise, or because of the adoption.
I don't know, Avery. What else would we be building? I don't think there's anything else we want to be doing. This is one of the most exciting things that you could be focused on, right? If I didn't have to work in the tech space, I think I don't know, Avery, if you would agree with this, I'd probably be writing some raps, and Avery would be freestyling and beatboxing for me.
Scalability or composability?
We don't need to give trade off those, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree with Avery. I think like that was a trade off maybe in the past, and I think we're solving that, right? So
yeah, that's the point. I think we can get this. I think we can have our cake and eat it too. Like as I mentioned before, it's really about how do you build software that scales across more machines, more resources, and provides the same level of composability for users. That's the holy grail.
To conclude, question I should have asked you but didn't.
You should have asked Mo what he uses to treat his hair.
That is a good one. That helps.
Nobody knows. Even I don't know. It's a secret, trade secret.
Love it. Thank you guys for coming. This is amazing. We got to see the human side of you, and we also got to learn a lot about Aptos, and it was also very education for me to know different things that are happening within the ecosystem. So again, thank you very much for coming.
It's our pleasure, Mehdi. Thanks so much for having us.
It's wonderful to be here today.
What's up? We just had a fascinating discussion with the co-founders of Aptos, Mo and Avery. My first sense was with these co-founders, we have a very strong founder market fit. Avery is strong on the technical and system side of things, and Mo complements him really well on the business development side of things. You could also see the inspiration behind them in terms of creating a L1 blockchain. I was very fascinated by the story Mo told me with regards to how his dad used to work as a part-time cab driver in New York, but majority of the value or the income accrued to the medallion owner, which is a taxi license holder in New York. So he kind of gets why decentralized platforms are important and why there's a need to disintermediate middle folks and platform. Avery, you could also get a sense that he's really passionate about scalable system, and he has had previously led teams in terms of high performance computing in Facebook as well as Yahoo. So apart from that, apart from the strong background, what makes Aptos Special is some of the secret sauce in terms of how they're thinking about scaling. So first, the first way they want to scale from a software side of things is the Move language, which is very composable, and you can do interesting things with the assets such as NFTs there. But more importantly, it also provides you strong developer tools. So Move Prover, which is a formal verifier, could theoretically help developers ship safe and trusted code. And since they could test that code and get quick feedback what is working, what is not working, they could deploy codes faster and at scale. And this could give them advantage to scale faster, especially when more Web2 developers are coming to the market as Web3 picks up. Apart from that, on the system side of things, they have introduced few things which are unique and also different from some of the traditional block L1s. So, for example, Ethereum is a single-threaded system where everything happens sequentially. But what Aptos has been trying to do is they have introduced parallel and independent transaction processing and flow. So, for example, transactions are first broken down and are done independently. So, dissemination of transaction, block ordering, execution, consensus storage are done independently and done in parallel. The transactions are then done in parallel. So, what that does is it increases the efficiency and gives you lower latencies and higher throughput because the validator resources are used in an optimal sense. So the way they'll scale is they can handle more transaction, but as the resources of these validators improve through Moore's law when it comes to CPUs, the compute, as well as storage, what will end up happening is that in a few years' time, we could come to a scenario where Aptos theoretically can handle 1 million transactions, and that is possible through combination of the programming language, the virtual machine, as well as some of the techniques that they're using. On the business development side of things, they did highlight few interesting projects. So one project is Topaz, which is an NFT marketplace. Another one was Chingari, which is a decentralized social media that is being built on Aptos. There were a few games that were name dropped. One was called Grand Saga Unlimited, Pixelcraft, and right now they are also doing this IRL experience with the Hollywood movie called Rhinefield, and they have tried to put that as a game. So there's some interesting development and interesting dApps on the Aptos ecosystem. So go check that out, and I'll just stop then and let you enjoy the podcast. So please go ahead.
This podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered as financial advice. Any opinions provided in this podcast reflect the views of the speakers only.